Key Principles, Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. Introduction, Key Principles, Daring Greatly. Brené Brown's Daring Greatly challenges the pervasive myth that vulnerability is weakness. This series, Key Principles, Daring Greatly, distills the book's core concepts, revealing how embracing vulnerability can lead to a more fulfilling and authentic life. We'll explore how to shed our armor, cultivate courage, and build meaningful connections through the power of vulnerability. Part 1. The Vulnerability Myth. Brené Brown's Daring Greatly challenges our misconceptions about vulnerability and explores its transformative power. This section delves into the true nature of vulnerability and the cultural forces that make us fear it. Defining vulnerability. Brown redefines vulnerability as not weakness, but rather emotional risk, exposure, and uncertainty. She emphasizes that vulnerability is the birthplace of joy, creativity, belonging, and love. Vulnerability is not about oversharing. It's about sharing our authentic selves when it is necessary. The culture of scarcity. Brown explores the pervasive culture of scarcity, which breeds feelings of never enough. This culture fuels shame, fear, and a constant need for validation. She explains that shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. The armor we wear. Brown identifies the various protective mechanisms we use to avoid vulnerability, such as perfectionism, numbing, and foreboding joy. These armors, while intended to shield us from pain, ultimately prevent us from experiencing genuine connection and fulfillment. These armors are very common, and most people use them without even realizing it. Part 2. The Vulnerability Armory. Brené Brown delves deeper into the specific ways we armor ourselves against vulnerability, exploring the common defenses we employ and their detrimental effects. Foreboding joy. This is the practice of anticipating catastrophe in moments of joy as a way to brace ourselves for disappointment. We fear that if we allow ourselves to fully experience joy, it will be taken away. This fear of joy robs us of the present moment and prevents us from fully embracing happiness. Perfectionism. Perfectionism is not about striving for excellence, but rather a belief that if we perform perfectly, we can avoid shame, blame, and judgment. It's a self-destructive belief that sets unattainable standards and leads to constant self-criticism. It is a shield that ends up hurting the person using it. Numbing. We use various forms of numbing, such as excessive busyness, substance abuse, or emotional detachment, to avoid feeling vulnerable or uncomfortable emotions. While numbing can provide temporary relief, it ultimately prevents us from experiencing the full range of human emotions, including joy and connection. You cannot selectively numb emotions. The vulnerability hangover. This refers to the feelings of shame, anxiety, and regret that can arise after we dare greatly and make ourselves vulnerable. Brown acknowledges that vulnerability can be uncomfortable and even painful, but it's essential for growth and connection. Learning how to process and cope with this hangover is crucial for building resilience. Part 3. Daring Greatly in Practice. Brené Brown shifts the focus from understanding vulnerability to actively embracing it in our lives. This section explores how to cultivate wholehearted living and build shame resilience. Wholehearted living. Brown defines wholehearted living as engaging in life from a place of worthiness. It involves cultivating courage, compassion, and connection, and embracing vulnerability is essential for these qualities. It means having the courage to be imperfect, the compassion to be kind to yourself first, and then to others, and the connection to live authentically. The arena. Brown uses Theodore Roosevelt's "Man in the Arena" quote to illustrate the courage required to step into vulnerability. She argues that those who dare greatly, even when faced with criticism and judgment, are the ones who truly live fulfilling lives. It is important to know that you will be criticized, but you should do it anyway. Shame resilience. Shame resilience is the ability to recognize and navigate shame while maintaining our sense of worthiness. It involves understanding our shame triggers, practicing critical awareness, reaching out to others, and speaking our shame. Developing shame resilience allows us to bounce back from vulnerability hangovers and to continue daring greatly. Shame cannot survive being spoken. Part 4. Daring Leadership in Parenting. Brené Brown extends her exploration of vulnerability to the realms of leadership and parenting, demonstrating how embracing vulnerability can transform these crucial aspects of our lives. Daring Leadership. Brown argues that vulnerability is essential for effective leadership. Leaders who are willing to be vulnerable foster trust, creativity, and innovation within their teams. Daring leaders prioritize empathy, courage, and connection over control and perfectionism. Vulnerable leaders create a culture of safety. Daring parenting. Brown emphasizes the importance of raising children who are resilient and wholehearted. Daring parents model vulnerability, teach their children about shame and empathy, and create a safe space for them to express their emotions. They focus on cultivating worthiness and authenticity rather than perfectionism and achievement. Children need to see their parents be vulnerable to understand that it is okay. The power of vulnerability in relationships. Brown underscores that vulnerability is the cornerstone of deep and meaningful connections. Authentic communication, empathy, and the willingness to be seen are crucial for building trust and intimacy. Vulnerable relationships are characterized by mutual support, acceptance, and a shared understanding of imperfection. These relationships help build resilience.